I don't know about you guys, but February felt like a super, super long month. Hey everyone, so today I'm going to be doing my February wrap up, and I read a total of 8 books, and I think every single one of them was contemporary, which is so strange because I kind of like went into this year being like, I'm gonna read more fantasy and sci-fi, and then the second month in the year, I'm like, let's just read contemporary for this entire month. And I'm actually not too mad about it because I did read quite a few of like really good books, but I just was not intending on reading 8 contemporaries. So I'm pretty sure for this month I read 2 physical books and 6 audiobooks, but I do have 2 of those audiobooks as physical copies, so I can show them here. And I think we'll start off with those. So one of the books that I read for this month was On the Come Up by Angie Thomas, and I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars, and I really enjoyed it. It was definitely a really good audiobook, and I think that I put this in my audiobook recommendations video recently, and it definitely deserves to be there because I really loved this audiobook, and I think it did a really good job at showing the raps that Brie wrote and performed. And I think that was definitely one of my favorite parts of the book, was getting to hear the raps performed. I feel like you get more out of that in the audiobook than in the physical book. So basically this is about a 16-year-old named Brie, and she is an aspiring rapper. Her dad was also an up-and-coming rapper, and just as he was about to make it big, he ended up getting shot and killed. And so Brie raps as well, and she really wants to make a name for herself. And this book is basically all about her journey into becoming a rapper and kind of the ups and downs of that, and it's really good. I really enjoyed it. I don't think I enjoyed it as much as The Hate U Give, but I really did enjoy listening to the audiobook, and I had such a good time. And I really like the way that Angie Thomas writes really relatable and realistic main characters. And I also like the way that she writes her families. I think those are my 2 favorite things about her writing, and it's just so well done and so good. I think the only negative things that I have about this book are that the side characters felt underdeveloped, and the friendships between Brie and her friends felt a little underdeveloped as well. Like, I didn't really understand why they were friends, and like their friendship really didn't mean anything to me. So I felt like that could have been done a little bit better. But overall, a 4 out of 5 star read. It was really good, and I totally recommend the audiobook for everyone. The next book was another audiobook that I read, but I have it as a physical copy, and that is Sadie by Courtney Summers, and I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars, which was super disappointing. Oh my gosh, one of the most disappointing reads like ever. Because I feel like everyone who's read this book or listened to the audiobook has loved it. It's always been like 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, and everyone raves about it. It's everyone's favorite audiobook, and I was so disappointed in this book. And it's like literally everything that I like is in this book, and then it just didn't work for me. I felt like my favorite parts of the book were the actual like podcast sections or chapters of the book. Those really worked for me, and I almost wish the entire story had been told through the podcast, because I felt like that would have been just so much more impactful for me. And getting to hear Sadie's perspective was sometimes interesting, and other times really just boring. I felt like a lot of Sadie's scenes were either redundant or not really like applicable to the plot and didn't really matter in the end. And a lot of Sadie's chapters ended up feeling like filler that was just kind of meant to propel you towards the plot rather than actually like leading you in that way. It just was like, we need to fill this book up with something, so let's just put her chapters in there and then we'll get to the end result. And it just left me feeling a little unsatisfied, and I was just really disappointed. I do feel like this is a book that a lot of people will love. So I mean, if you love true crime and you love true crime podcasts, then you might really enjoy Sadie as well. But for me, it just did not work. I didn't really like the writing style. I really wish it had just been the podcast episodes, and that's about it. So the first book that I read physically for this month was actually a library book, and that is Here We Are Now by Jasmine Warga. And oh my gosh, a 5 out of 5 star read. This book literally made my entire month. It was just, it put my month at such a good starting point. And I just love this book so much. Like, look at the cover, it's gorgeous. But then the contents of this book are just so impactful for me. I cried a lot while reading this book, and I think it just like hit something in my soul and spoke to me. So basically this is about a teenage girl, and she has always believed that her father is actually a famous rock star. She's never met her father. Her mom won't speak about him at all, and she won't confirm or deny whether that rock star is her father. So she ends up sending a bunch of letters to him and never hears back until one day he ends up showing up at her doorstep, and her entire life changes, and she finds out that, oh my gosh, he is actually her dad. This literally happens in the first chapter. This isn't a spoiler. And it just leads you on this journey throughout her life and his life and her mom's life and how everything connects. And it's just so beautifully done, so wonderful. And I just love this book so much. I could literally rave about it all the time. If you like music, or if you like books about musicians or music or whatever, you're gonna love this book. I really want to make a video about books centered around music. I just need to read a couple more of them just to kind of get a well-rounded view. But this is definitely gonna go on that video. And it was so perfect. And it was such a fast and quick read and so wonderful. Nothing felt underdeveloped. I really love the main character, and I love the story of her parents meeting and falling in love and all of their drama. It was just wonderful. It was everything I could have asked for in a book, and I'm so glad I just picked it up on a whim at the library. The second book I ended up reading as a physical book was This Is Kind of an Epic Love Story by Kacen Callender, and I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. So I was really enjoying this book at first, but as the book went on, it kind of dragged and it stopped being interesting. There was just something about it that just didn't feel like the stakes were high enough, that anything of importance was really happening. And I started to kind of feel like the characters were a bit stale, and they weren't really learning from their mistakes, and nothing was really developing. So that's kind of why I gave it a more lukewarm rating. Like, I still enjoyed it, but it wasn't my favorite, and it wasn't super impactful for me. So I did end up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. Basically, it's about this boy, and he wants to be a screenwriter, and he actually ended up breaking up with his girlfriend because she cheated on him, and they're still friends though. And then his childhood crush moves back into town, and things get really complicated, and it's just a lot of cheating and miscommunication and lying, which I actually really enjoyed those aspects of the book because I felt like it made the book a little bit more realistic, especially for like teenagers, and how teenage relationships are kind of fickle and like not really set in stone, and how feelings can get hurt really easily. But I just didn't really feel like the characters learned enough from their mistakes. Like, I felt like the ending was definitely like it wrapped everything up and it was great, but I just didn't feel like there was enough development throughout the book. It felt kind of like once they did learn something, it was a little too like instantaneous learning rather than learning throughout the course of the book. And it was just kind of frustrating in that aspect. And then a lot of the stuff was just kind of filler chapters that didn't really mean anything. But overall, I did really like the character dynamics, and I liked the character relationships, and I liked the fact that the relationships and characters were like super realistic for teenagers, and they made mistakes and did like bad things. But overall, it just didn't really speak to me on any sort of like level. But I did really enjoy reading it, and I will definitely check out some more of Kacen Callender's works because I do think that they're a really good author. Okay, so on to the audiobooks that I do not own. So the first one that I read was What I Leave Behind by Allison McGee, and I gave that a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this book, but I will say trigger warning for rape, and it is definitely mentioned. It's not shown like on page, but it is mentioned, and I I think there's also suicide in this book. So those 2 trigger warnings for this. And I just really, really enjoyed this book. It's very short. Basically, there are 100 chapters and each chapter has 100 words. So it's a super short book and it was really fast to get through. And I really, really liked it. It was definitely a nice kind of like snapshot of real life. And it definitely was not like super sugar-coated, but there was kind of like a surreal aspect to the book. At least for me, I felt like it was a little bit surreal, and the language was definitely very descriptive and beautiful, and I really, really liked it. I don't feel like there was too much for improvement, but it just wasn't like something that I'm like, oh, that's my new favorite. It was just something that I really enjoyed, and I thought that it was written very well, and I really liked the audiobook. It was definitely fun to listen to. The next audiobook I read was Sometime After Midnight by Elle Phillips, and I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars as well. So this is another music-oriented book. It's basically a Cinderella retelling in like modern times, and it's about this boy, and he's a musician. His dad was also a musician, but he ended up committing suicide, so trigger warning for suicide as well for this book. And the main character feels like the blame is really on his bad record label and his bad record deal. And so he has always been wary of this record label. He really hates them. He really doesn't want anything to do with them, but he wants to be a musician. And then there's another main character, and he is actually the son of the guy that owns the record label. And so they end up meeting at a concert, and they don't know who each other is, but they are like instantly attracted to each other, and they end up talking, but are quickly kind of ripped apart. And all that one of the guys has is a picture of the other guy's shoes, and he ends up putting them on Instagram, kind of like shouting him out, like, where is this guy? Can anyone find this guy with these shoes? And things kind of hit the fan once they realize who each other is, and it's just so good. I really loved it. I know that's probably a really confusing synopsis. I'm super sorry, but it's just so good. I read this as an audiobook, like I said, and it was a great audiobook. I'm pretty sure I mentioned it in my audiobook recommendations video, and it definitely stands. I love this audiobook, and I love this book as well. It was just so cute and so sweet. I loved it so much, and I love the main characters. They were so realistic and just like these great like angsty teenagers, and I loved it. It was just wonderful. Okay, so I think this next book is probably my favorite book of the month, and that is Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson, and I loved this book. This book broke me, and 5 out of 5 stars, obviously. Like, this is the book I was mentioning when I was talking about Sadie, where it's a similar kind of book, but it was done so much better. Monday's Not Coming is literally one of the best books I've ever read. It just was so impactful. It made me cry. I could so relate to it, not in the way that like something bad has happened to one of my best friends, but it's like the relationship between Monday and Claudia is just like, that's my relationship with one of my childhood best friends. And it was just like, I could see myself in them so much, and it really heightened my emotions for that book, I guess. And wow, like if you read any book from this video, make it Monday's Not Coming, because this book and this audiobook was just incredible. And the last book that I have to talk about is There's Something About Sweetie by Sandhya Menon, and I gave that book a 4 out of 5 stars, and holy moly, it was such a cute book. Basically, this book is about Sweetie, and she is a plus-size runner on her school's track team, and she ends up kind of getting set up on a date with Ashish Patel. Basically, her mom kind of forbids her from going out with Ashish, but they go out anyway, and it's so cute, and things are just adorable. We love Sweetie. We love Ashish. They're both adorable. I don't know, they're just so cute, and I can't believe I put off reading this book for so long. I was just nervous. I don't know why. I get nervous with like fat representation. I never know if it's gonna be really good or not. But from seeing what Zoe had to say about it in one of her videos about fat representation, I will link it down below, I knew I had to read it. I knew I was gonna love it, and so I got super excited when I found the audiobook, and I was able to listen to it, and it was amazing, and I totally recommend the audiobook. It was so cute. Okay, so that was my February wrap up. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm really proud of myself for how many books I read. I hope that I can keep up the momentum and read just as many books, if not more, in March. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And let me know down in the comments what books you read in February that you really enjoyed. Give me some recommendations. Also, go ahead and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Goodreads, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!